Allahu, Allahu, Allahu. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Allahu, Allahu, Allahu. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. L'shem yichud kudsha brichu u'shachinte. It's an Aramaic intention that we say before we consciously engage in a holy act. And it's in our mystical Jewish tradition. That's how I know it. And as I stand here before you, I'm thinking also that language was the language that Jesus spoke with his friends and his students and his followers. It was Aramaic, and it kind of points to the common roots of our religious traditions. As a Jewish person, growing up, I was very involved with Israel and with Zionism from a very idealistic, and now I can say very romanticized, almost fantasy point of view. As you heard in the introduction, I lived there. I first went when I was 19 years old. I felt like that is the place where I belong in the world. The fact that I got born in North America might have been a lucky accident, that my recent ancestors, like grandparents, left Europe. Thank God they were able to come to North America and live a peaceful and relatively prosperous life. That's beautiful and wonderful, but now it's time for me to correct this historical accident that we ended up there, because where we belong is in the land of Israel. And I was going to be part of that project. And being there, I guess I can say again, thank God, I was able to see some of the reality right before my eyes, despite the kind of ideology or indoctrination or training or just idealism that would block it out. Little by little by little, I learned and I saw more, and I got more and more and more active in trying to right the wrongs, bring more justice, which is the only way to peace. And as a Jewish person and a rabbi and an activist, I really didn't understand until rather recently that I can say we have allies in the churches. For me, it was only maybe 3 or 4 years ago that I learned about Unjapi, and I learned that at the General Assembly of the United Church of Canada, I don't know, what was it, 2012 or 13 maybe, this resolution was coming up around a very narrowly defined, support for BDS. I don't know how much this will mean to you all, but speaking from my point of view, again, as a committed, loyal, religious Jew, happens to be a rabbi, I've worked through my adult life in the Jewish community up until recently. Some of my experience with the Jewish analog to Christian Zionism has been, I'll talk about it. I would say it's been deeply alienating to me. I feel rather alienated from my religious community. I hardly have a religious community at all anymore. There are people scattered here and there in different places, different cities, who I can connect with around my understanding of my religion, but there's no synagogue in this city where I live, right here, where I can walk in and feel okay. And through my career as a rabbi, I met many Jews who feel the same way. And I think the kind of overwhelming institutional Jewish commitment to this narrow definition of Zionism has served to drive away from religion and Judaism and even Jewish identification many, 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 many Jews. People who read the newspaper, they watch TV, they know what's going on in Israel and in Palestine more and more, have a deep sense that they must oppose it. Close to 20 years ago, I was serving as a rabbi in the congregation in Vancouver that clearly defines itself as the open-minded, progressive congregation that's on the liberal fringe of the Jewish community. I was the rabbi there for 8 years. There was a couple that came to me, wanted to be married. We were talking about the wedding ceremony, the Jewish wedding ceremony. The thing that you say to marry someone in Judaism, the oath or whatever it is, when you hold out the ring and you look into your beloved's eyes and you say to them in Hebrew something like, "Behold, be consecrated to me with this ring in the ways of Moses and Israel." Of course, what does Israel mean in that statement that comes from 1,000 years ago? Moses and Israel, Moses and the people of Israel. This is how we marry each other. So I said this to the bride and groom, and the groom said, "No, I don't want Israel in my wedding." Deep sadness, and I'm talking about alienation and the split, driving away Jewish people who, like people everywhere, are basically moral, good people. They have a perhaps innate God-given sense of what's good and right and holy. And how sad that is. And that's a story that to me is very illustrative. I did things that had never been done here in Vancouver before. They felt very kind of courageous and cutting edge and so on. Just to move the boundaries a little bit. And I was very careful not to do too much. I always discussed it with the board of the synagogue before I did anything like that. Got the board's approval. Almost always what I tried to do was invite speakers who I knew were going on some kind of a tour in North America. Maybe they're going to Seattle. We'll get them to come here to Vancouver too. Jewish Israelis who were involved in trying to change things in Israel from within. Jewish, Zionist, Israeli citizens, born and raised in Israel, served in the military. They know what they're doing. One of them was a woman involved in a beautiful project called Beyond Words. She works in the Galilee with, we would say, Israeli Arabs, although today I would never say that, Palestinians who live in the state of Israel. In early childhood education, there's Jewish villages and Jewish schools, and then across the road on the other side of the hill, Palestinian, or they would say Arab villages with Arab schools. Little children, 2, 3, 4 years old, never see each other, never meet. Their teachers never meet. These are early childhood educators. So this is a project called Beyond Words that brought the teachers together. Of course, the teachers are all women. And they started off their encounters by things like giving each other back massages and things like that. So one of the things I did, among many other things, was invited the two leaders of that organization. One is a Jewish Israeli woman. The other is a Palestinian, although then she would be called an Arab Israeli. They came and they spoke in our synagogue. How mild could it be, But after a number of years, that became so controversial that it was clearly a factor in my position as rabbi with that congregation not being renewed because, and I also want to say, I think 80 or 90% of the members of the congregation, maybe 200 members, they're very proud of what we were doing. They thought it's exactly right. They felt good to be part of that congregation that is doing something about this problem that nobody else is doing. 80 or 90%, but maybe there were 5% where it was like a thorn in their side, and they simply couldn't abide it. And it was so disturbing and upsetting to them. And that set up a dynamic within the congregation of dis-ease, ill feelings, contention, and the most important thing is that everyone get along, that this be a place of harmony. You know, when we come in the door, nothing should upset us, right? That's very important when you come to worship. You don't want to be disturbed about anything. So the easiest way to take care of that was just have a rabbi who won't do that stuff anymore. And that is what they did. They have a wonderful rabbi who does wonderful things, but this controversy never enters the doors. That congregation, again, it's the most liberal, progressive congregation in Vancouver. They formally adopted a policy that the Israel-Palestine issue may not be discussed. No one is allowed to post to the email discussion list about this issue because it's so disturbing, it'll upset us. And we can't have that. So again, this is just illustrative of a dynamic in the entire Jewish community. Such controversy among us, Reconstructionist rabbis and Reconstructionist movement, someone said, let's put on our website different discussion about things about Israel that are controversial, and we can talk about it on our website. This week, one of the rabbis in my organization was asked to write a piece, and in the piece that was going to be posted by invitation to him, he talked about he supports BDS. And that was not allowed to be posted on this website. And that caused a minor controversy. I'm talking about like on Tuesday this week. And again, this is just by illustration. One of us said we need to talk with each other. And I mean the Reconstructionist rabbis who are involved with the Jewish Voice for Peace. And there may be, I don't know, if Alyssa's here, she can tell me the number, but there's maybe 20 or 30 of us out of maybe 350 or 400 Reconstructionist rabbis anywhere. So that's maybe 10% of us. We had a little phone conversation and we talked about what to do. It's so difficult. So this piece that was invited, where he said he supports BDS, he was told it can't be published because we can't associate that with the movement, the Reconstructionist movement, but he could submit it as a comment. And that's how it's ended up. Just 2 or 3 years ago, the Jewish Council on Public Affairs, which is a large organization in the States, did a survey of something like 550 rabbis, all different backgrounds, and they said that over 30% of rabbis say they are fearful of significant professional repercussions if they speak honestly about Israel. I'll just repeat that. 30% of rabbis and congregations are fearful of significant professional repercussions if they speak honestly about this.